It's the end. I scared Riker by saying that. Hello! Are you guys so ready? I hope everyone's so ready. I think that I have advertised everywhere I was going to advertise. I have eaten everything I planned on eating. I chugged a Mountain Dew, which means that I will probably have just as much trouble with burping as always because I need the caffeine. It's a price I have to pay. Oh, I should definitely not start on that page. So that would be kind of major spoilers. There we go. I caught some stuff in last week's reading that made me go back and edit and make a new PDF. And I was checking it out. But I skipped too far ahead. My mic volume good? You guys hear me okay? Post. Actually, really like this mix that I found for tonight. It's nice and chill. Alright. Turn that down. Manually fade it out. I somehow sort of almost stream sometimes. Welcome! Welcome! Alright. Well, last time was quite an exciting one. Uh, there was a whole trail of bodies, broken houses, murder investigation leading to attack underneath the prison. It was just a whole fun, crazy time. Um, we followed Leo as his investigation continued into trying to uncover his former police chief's dirty laundry. Tracking down a group of street racers from 30 years prior that Bradburn had arrested and eventually worked out essentially plea deals with all of them. Uh, Leo's trying to find witnesses to understand why these things happened, what's going on, what deals were made, etc., etc. That's my timer saying that it's time to start reading. We'll get there in a second. Uh, so, Leo didn't find witnesses. Well, he found one. Locked in the basement of District 8's prison, he met Tigra. But when he went trying to make house calls with the other people on the list, he found that Salatra's home was vandalized. He found Forahana and her family shot and killed in their own home. It would look like there was some kind of alchemantic struggle. And he went racing off to the prison because he put two and two together that someone was tying up loose ends. So he went racing off to the prison, which is where his partner, Melissa, had gone to go obtain a prisoner transfer for both Tigra and Rolf, the kid from the hospital incident. Meanwhile, Moira, Naira, and Naomi had all gone to visit District 8's prison because they were planning a little bit of a jailbreak for Rolf. Along the way, they ran into Detective Melissa, and the two groups kind of paired up because they had common interests in seeing these prisoners go free. Turned out, however, their presence there was not wanted, and they found themselves caught up in the middle of someone's experiment. They got locked in the basement of the prison. The lights went out, and monsters got let loose. Something that they described as something of a mix between zombies and werewolves, but also vampires because they were big, hairy, and liked to bite on people, suck the magic right out of them. So, there was a whole big, desperate fight. Very tense things happened, and they survived by the skin of their teeth. So now, we come back to the story with Leo. You guys ready? This is the last 3 chapters of Volume 1. We wrap up tonight. Well, this book anyway. And then we start the next one next week. But for now, all right. Chapter 32. Release. Leo flipped the breaker by the door, restoring power to B2. Mountain Dew's already coming back to bite me. Using the warden's ID and keys, he let himself into the cell block. That Mueller of a warden had wanted to stay behind in the safety of his office, offering to send a small group of prison guards with Leo in his stead. Leo had taken the offer of additional guards, but physically dragged the warden along too. Now, the warden stood halfway back in the crowd, his own men confused, but following the orders they'd been given. The overhead firearm lights did a dismal job of lighting the hallway, but it was easy to see every cell had been opened. An unpleasant odor hung in the air, one which Leo instinctively associated with a morgue. They found bodies right away, and the cause of death was gut-wrenching. There were 4 prisoners dead in this first hall, a couple near the door, and the others in their now open cells. Every one of them had been torn to pieces. Leo had seen a lot of things in his time with Precinct 3, but this was the first time he'd ever witnessed true disemboweling. Entire chunks of these people had been ripped away and were just gone. The floor and walls were smattered with blood and viscera. He didn't stop to stare, instead continuing down the hall. He stepped into the solitary wing and wasn't surprised to see more corpses. He was, however, surprised to see a small group of people huddling in a circle. The second surprise came when he saw Melissa, who was part of that group, wheel around and level her gun at him. Leo's hands instinctively shot up to either side. Breathing out with visible relief, Melissa lowered the gun. She was a mess. Her uniform was soaked, stained, and even torn in places, with streaks of blood marring the otherwise white fur on her hands and face. "Thank the seed, Mother," she said. "Leo, I've never been happier to see you." Raising an eyebrow, he asked, Really? I feel like there's definitely been happier circumstances. Not like this, she muttered, shaking her head. Not like this. Then she pointed at one of the nearby corpses. It took Leo a moment to realize what was wrong. At a passing glance, it looked like some of the prisoners, but it was stretched out, almost emaciated. Parts of its body had continued to grow even when the main body had stopped. The limbs, teeth, face, torso, all of it was just long, in a distinctly unsettling way. This one's skull had been fractured severely, with the right side of its face nearly stoved in. The left side of the skull featured not one or two, but 4 bullet holes. Seed Mother, Leo whispered. Did you have to do that? Melissa nodded. There was no reasoning with these things. As Leo looked around, he spotted 3 more corpses like this one, each one competing to be more grotesque than the last. One was even missing its head, though based on the blood smear and the dented steel door beside the body, Leo could guess where the head had disappeared to. Fanina, what happened down here? Melissa narrowed her eyes at the warden hiding among his posse of guards. The entire group looked ready to lose their lunches, and Leo couldn't blame them. This was a first for him, too. Leaning in close, Melissa whispered, Not here. We'll talk, but not around them. I don't trust them. Leo nodded. He didn't trust them either, especially finding his friend like this. Someone was growing desperate, and Leo had a few key suspects for who that might be. Any talking that happened here would find its way up the chain. There'd already been an attempt on Leo's life, and now Melissa's life. If the wrong word made it to the wrong people, one or both of them would end up dead. He turned to survey the other survivors, and was surprised again by what he saw. Tigra, the big tiger, and Rolf, the Nolfin Kit, both made sense. The timing on that one. Tigra, the big tiger, and Rolf, the Nolfin Kit, both made sense. They'd been locked up down here. But Naira was here. The teacher had an uncanny knack for being at the wrong place at the right time. She'd saved Leo before, and based on the blood on her own clothing and the way she was currently tending to a third Nolf, it seemed likely she'd help save this group too. This third Nolf was not someone Leo recognized. Judging by her edgy outfit and spiky hairdo, she was probably similar in age to Rolf. The last of the survivors was... Seed Mother. There was a Sneppard Kit down here. She wasn't looking at Leo, because she was currently working with Naira to examine the Nolf's arm, which looked to have been splinted. But that bright jacket, stained as it was by blood that neared on black, looked uncomfortably familiar. Then he caught a glimpse of the face, and it clicked. Reaching out, he caught Melissa by the shoulder and leaned in to hiss, Why the Fanina is the daughter of Renetta Dolahan here? Melissa looked at him in absolute bewilderment. Then she followed his gaze towards the girl. Apparently, he'd been loud enough for the girl to hear, because she looked up and met his eyes. She didn't look to be in a good mood to begin with, and when she saw him, her expression soured even more. It would seem she remembered him too. I had no idea, Melissa said. They were already here when I got here, and they came down with me. They got trapped with the rest of us, so they're safe to trust. They're caught up in everything, same as we are. Tross, this was a convoluted mess. At this point, Naira checked to see what had upset the kit, and distracted herself from whatever they were doing. She followed the girl's gaze to see Leo, and her expression darkened too. Leo knew he wasn't popular, but he had at least gotten the door unlocked. Unlike the kit, Naira composed herself quickly, and her face gave way to a polite smile and her small, typical bow of deferential greeting. With a sigh, Leo whispered, You already get the transfer set up? I warned the warden it was coming, Melissa replied. He wasn't happy, and he called someone to check about it. That's when he received permission to bring us down here for testing. So something tells me it didn't go through. Let's just assume it did. I don't want to leave any of you here. We need witnesses, and those are dwindling fast. When I checked Naira's home, it had been ransacked, so I stopped at Forohana's house on the way here. I found her and 4 more dead, all shot with high-caliber firearm rounds. Someone's cleaning house. Her eyes widened. Seed Mother, she whispered. Leo, we're in some deep dross. I know, but we're not alone, so let's make the most of it. He gestured towards the other survivors with his head. If they're able, get them ready to go. She nodded grimly and turned to comply. After a single step, she stopped and turned back. A wry smirk took over her face. You're getting pretty good at bossing people around, Chief. Power must be getting to your head. She said the last part with a wink, then hurried away before he could retort. His annoyance was brief, washed away by the simple joy that she was alive and okay, and even able to joke after whatever had happened down here. But details would have to wait until they were safely, well, anywhere else. So turning towards the warden, he announced with all the confidence he could muster, "We'll be invoking that transfer now." He's small cut. Bleed has stopped. Tigra is fine now. Safe Kurum. Moira lowered the Kurum crystal she'd been preparing to crack. Glancing at the tiger's exposed torso and limbs, it was difficult to believe he was fine. Trails of crimson wove together and intersected like his blood was a race of tiny red people who decided to leave the safety of his body and colonize the surface. Movement couldn't be pleasant. Even breathing had to hurt. She could hear the occasional hitch in his breath, confirming her suspicions, but his personal drumbeat soldiered on. He was clearly proud with how things had turned out. What was another couple dozen scars to add to the collection? So, she compromised. Naira's bag hung from her shoulder, and she put the last high-grade Kurum crystal they had back in. They'd used most of them to treat her own gashes, Naira's shoulder, and Naomi's arm, and only had one strong one left. They did, however, have plenty of low-grade ones left over, so she used one of those on him instead. He sighed, but didn't protest. Thank you, little Moira. The only reason she didn't immediately rebuff the name was that she'd heard him refer to Naira as Little Salatra earlier. In his case, everyone really was little, so she could let it slide. Healing people as they walked was what gave her the strength to pass all of the jail cells on the way back. By focusing only on the song of the person she was healing, she could shut out all the questions and taunts and jeers the prisoners bombarded them with. The others had surrounded her, so she was middle of the pack, like they were her personal squad of giant bodyguards. For once, it was nice to not see much beyond them. They returned to the area by the warden's office, and the detective and her boss went in to have a final chat with him and do some paperwork. The rest of them waited in the hallway beside it, under a watch of nearly a dozen guards. Not a one of them was looking at her. Most watched Tigra, and a few watched the Nulfs, but none of the guards even gave her a second glance. If she'd been in the mood to steal something, she probably could have without getting caught, but her general exhaustion outweighed her need to prove a point. She just descended into Fanina and back, and the adrenaline and stress was still fading. Tigra talked loudly with Naira, not caring if the guards overheard, as he described in exaggerated and gory detail what had just happened downstairs. Rolf asked to use a bathroom, and 2 guards escorted him. That left Naomi, who had sat down on a small chair to rest her arm in her lap, and Moira, who was just standing around awkwardly. She didn't want to thank Naomi, but she knew she should. If she didn't do it now, it would have to happen in front of Rolf. Frankly, she was surprised Naomi hadn't volunteered to escort him to the bathroom too. So at least they had one boundary. It still took almost half a minute to talk herself into walking over, and then only when Naomi happened to make eye contact. A half smile was exchanged, which was enough to overcome Moira's hang-ups. With a sigh, Moira took a seat beside the uncharacteristically demure punk goddess. They sat beside each other in silence for a few long moments, until Moira asked, "How's the arm?" Naomi rotated it with a slight shrug. "Still aches like it got smashed, but I think you guys repaired the bulk of the fracture. Don't worry, I'm going to be gentle with it for a while." The splint probably wasn't necessary at this point, but she'd opted to leave it on. Moira pulled a fresh canister of shimmer from the bag, noting with disappointment that they'd used over half her supply. Their judicious use had saved all their lives, so she really shouldn't complain. Again, the guards didn't even notice her. She could be a kid getting high on drugs from her shoulder bag, and they were so distracted by their prejudice they couldn't even see her. Pulling out some low-grade Curum, Moira continued to work on Naomi's arm. The Nulf chuckled. "Really, Moira, it's gonna be fine. Just let me do this, okay?" "Suit yourself." Another silence fell, and it wasn't uncomfortable, except for Moira's conscience yelling at her for avoiding being a big girl. Forcing a swallow, she finally managed a quiet, "Thank you." Naomi laughed in surprise. "For what? Holding still?" Shaking her head, Moira said, "For saving me." With a grin, Naomi wrapped her good arm around Moira's shoulder, pulling her in tight before running her knuckles along the top of Moira's head. "Wasn't a big deal, Pips." Then she paused. "Sorry, Moira." Moira gave an exhausted snort. She considered staying quiet, but it wouldn't feel right. "I don't hate the nickname, you know. I had a lot of ones thrown my way growing up, going through school. Compared to those, Pips isn't bad." "Such as?" Naomi prodded. "If you think I'm going to give you any ideas or ammunition to use on me, then I should stop treating your arm and start treating your arm and start treating your head." Naomi grinned and leaned back in her seat. "Now you're starting to get it. Calling someone names isn't the same as giving them a nickname. One's bullying, and the other's a sign of affection. Though, honestly, the best nicknames are a combination of the two. Know what the boys call me?" Moira frowned, thinking back. She was pretty sure she'd only ever heard them call her Naomi. She'd just assumed that any attempted nicknames had been promptly met with Naomi's fists, so she shook her head. "Chipper," Naomi said. "Because you're just always happy?" Moira guessed. Naomi grinned. "Nope. Back when we were little kids, a whole bunch of us played baseball together. I was the only girl on the team, and I was pretty mediocre at the game. And, young as we were, I was about the smallest kid there. So for a while, I was a runt, since I was the smallest in the batch and always got picked last. Then, as I started to grow, my eye-hand coordination struggled to keep up, and I was terrible at catching with a glove. So I got in the bad habit of catching with my mouth. Not technically illegal, but it doesn't taste good. Plus, no one likes to be on the receiving end of a ball covered in slobber. But hey, that was their problem, not mine." It took Moira a moment to realize she'd never once considered using her mouth during PE. Sneppered muzzles were too short and small for that to work, but a Nulf? Didn't sound sanitary, but it did at least sound feasible. Naomi continued. "Everyone knew I did this, and gave me lots of grief for it, but no one really stopped me. One day, we're playing, and this kid hits a pop fly. It's the bottom of an inning. If I catch this ball, we're back up to bat. So I run for it and try to catch it with my glove, but it bounces out. I end up juggling it a bit, and finally, as it's about to hit the ground, I dive and catch it with my mouth. Counts as an out, everyone's cheering, I feel amazing. Everyone's tossing their gloves in the dugout and lining up to bat. The other team's grabbing their gloves and running out onto the field, when I realize I've got a problem. I can't let go of the ball. Somehow, I had jammed it so far back that it had gotten stuck right around here." Pulling her lips back, Naomi pointed towards her back teeth, tapping the ones in question. Ow, Moira sympathized. Naomi shrugged. My teeth kind of sank into the ball, so just holding it wasn't so bad. Opening my jaw wide enough to get it out? That hurt, and the umpire had to help me. The whole time he's trying to get it out, I've got this big baseball stuck in my mouth, and my cheeks ballooned out to the side. So with my orange and black fur and stuffed cheek, 3 guesses what I looked like. A chipmunk? Moira guessed. Yep. And that's when I became Chipper. It fit doubly well because I was not a happy kid. I've always been competitive, probably obvious since I insisted on playing baseball with the boys, and I hated losing. When I was bad at something, I worked to get better so I could prove everyone wrong. That year, Chipper was still picked last. Except on rare occasions when Ren got to be team captain, but I think he had a bit of a crush on me. Nothing serious, obviously. We were like 9 at the time. Point is, people still thought Chipper was bad at baseball, and now they had a name to pin to it. So you know what I did? Moira shook her head, completely engrossed in the story of such a normal-sounding childhood. It was the very thing she'd always envied from afar, and never had, and listening to it now felt like listening to a fairy tale. Yet her view of Naomi as a beautiful, perfect statue was crumbling away to reveal the surprisingly real and ordinary person beneath. For the first time, she was seeing this woman for who she really was. Naomi grinned, oblivious to this change in Moira's perception, as she continued. I picked Rolf, my fellow rescue, and the only kid smaller than me, and made him practice with me. Pitching, tossing, batting, all of it. By the time the next summer rolled around, he and I had both improved significantly. And after my first Grand Slam, suddenly everyone wanted Chipper on their team. She laughed, shaking her head in embarrassment. Seed Mother, I was pissed. I thought for sure the name would die when I showed I was just as good or better at baseball than the boys. But it stuck around. Wasn't until teen years that it died, and even then only after I threw a few punches. Rolf backed me up, too. We'd both shot up a little above average at that point, especially Rolf. I think he's still growing even now. But that got the name to drop. Well, to my face, anyway. Moira nodded thoughtfully. So it did take a bit of violence to get it to die? Naomi grinned. Yeah, but after a year went by without it, I actually kind of missed it. Looking back, I can see the transition where it stopped being bullying and started being affectionate. Took all of us growing older, becoming closer friends, but... She shrugged. I will say, sometimes the only way to get a guy to listen is by pounding the words into his skull. So don't be afraid to get your hands a little dirty when you need to, Pips. Moira gave her a look. You telling me to punch you? I'm telling you that whatever your friends call you, it's up to you how to take it and what to do with it. So we're... friends? Naomi laughed, squeezing Moira's shoulder again. Calling you Pips didn't give that away? How sheltered are you? Very, Moira muttered. Yeah, we're gonna have to fix that. Moira smirked. This was exactly the kind of friend her mother didn't want her to have, which just made her all the more perfect. The smirk softened as Moira remembered why she'd come over in the first place. Seriously, Naomi, thank you for coming after me when that thing dragged me away. Naomi shrugged. You'd have done the same. In fact, you did do the same. If you hadn't come running back with that firearm torch, the monster would have bitten my arm clean off. So I'd say that all things considered, we're pretty even. At least on that count. Great. So she was keeping score. What do I still owe you, then? You've got that backwards, Pips. You're not the one in debt, Naomi said, pointing towards where Rolf was returning with his escort. But you are the one in his seat. So if you're attached to sitting right now, you can either squeeze between us or sit on my lap. Moira turned to scowl at the grinning Nulf goddess of mischief beside her. This is the part where I hit my friend for being an idiot, right? Naomi shrugged. Anywhere but my arm. Thankfully, Moira was saved from any embarrassing decisions when Detective McKinley and District 3's newest police chief exited the warden's office. How the previous monolith of a police chief had ever been replaced with this guy, Moira had no idea. Still, despite her sour first impressions of him from back when she'd thought her mother was dead, his arrival here had turned the lights back on and unlocked the doors. That didn't make it any less frustrating to be indebted in any way to such a spineless, incompetent Mueller, though. Both officers looked grim, and while Detective McKinley offered an attempt at a reassuring smile, the chief clearly wasn't in a good mood. Time to go, he said, waving towards the door. Moira hopped from her chair, and despite her better judgment, blurted, Go where? What's been decided? The chief's shoulders rose and fell, an emotion complementing the weariness in his eyes. To our precinct in District 3. All of us? She asked. He nodded. She expected him to go on, but he didn't. He just thanked the warden in a flat tone and gestured at the door again like no explanation was needed. No, screw that. She had a right to know what was going to happen. They all did. So what, then? She asked, taking a step forward. Taking us from one prison to throw us in another? The chief glanced around the room, then back at her. The traces of shimmer still in her system helped her pick up on the agitation in his breathing. Good. Let him be agitated. He could join the Bracken Club. Letting out his breath in a slow exhale, he said in a falsely courteous voice, We're transferring prisoners, and I'm going to need statements from everyone. She took another step forward, pointing an accusing finger at him. You went down there, saw what you saw, found us like you did, and you want statements? Moira. Naira's hand slid onto Moira's shoulder as she softly said her name. It wasn't as big as Sergei's, but in that moment it felt equally comforting. However, this man was clearly about to try to sweep things under the rug, and Moira was going to call him out on it, even if no one else did. You want your statements? She demanded. I got your statements. El scuzzy bracking slimeball warden over here locked us underground with a bunch of anima spawn that wanted to feast on our soft, squishy insides. She leveled her finger at the warden, who quite gratifyingly averted his gaze. Spittle flew as she continued. They didn't give a dross about who lived and died down there as part of their test. She felt Naira's fingers digging into her shoulder, though not painfully. Moira, she said in a low voice that was as cautious as it was scolding. And that's when Moira noticed. The demeanor of everyone in the room had changed when she mentioned a test. Guards were eyeing each other with looks of puzzlement and looking to the warden for guidance. The police chief's fingers disappeared into his palms as he marched towards her. Which is why, he emphasized, we're going to take statements in a neutral location where the truth can be encouraged without bias. Then he whispered, though his lips barely moved. The hint, Kit, please. All eyes were on her, Naira, and the chief. Tigra, Rolf, and Naomi had gathered in a small cluster, and the detective was hovering close to them. The guards in the room formed a loose circle, none directly blocking the exit, though they kept looking between it and the warden. Sometimes it was important to speak one's mind. Sometimes it was important to know when to shut up. Suddenly, it seemed a very prudent time for the latter. Having opened her mouth already, failure to commit now might almost be more problematic. Adopting a scowl wasn't a challenge, since she was already upset. Fine, but we will have lawyers present. And witnesses. None of this is going to be hidden. She hoped it wasn't too much. There was a delicate balance she wanted to walk, of making sure everyone present knew they were complicit, while not letting on just how much someone of her privilege might actually be able to do about it. Because when her mother found out, yeah, she'd be mad at Moira for a bit. but she'd be far angrier at such blatant corruption. When Renetta Dolahan found out what happened here? When Renetta Dolahan found out what happened here, Mr. Warden could kiss his job goodbye. That sentiment enabled her to give him a polite smile, though she flipped him off afterwards for the instant gratification. Then the guards ushered them out of the hall, through the lobby, and out into the parking lot. The sun had set already, and Fyram street lamps showed only 2 cars and 2 hover bikes in the visitor parking. No sooner had they stepped outside than the chief pulled a small box from his shirt pocket and extracted a necrol stick from it. Not missing a beat, both Naomi and Rolf piped up. "Can I have one?" The chief hesitated for a moment, then held the box out towards them until they'd each taken a stick. He pulled a Fyram lighter from another pocket and received a swift elbow jab to the ribs from his detective. "Leo," she hissed, "you said you quit." "And it's been a very stressful day for everyone. I think we're allowed." Stepping around Moira, Naira reached out and swiped the necrol sticks from the 2 younger Nolfs. They both protested, but she ignored them, wheeling on the chief. "I already told you that these things wreck your insides. A police officer should not be handing them out to children. Wouldn't you agree?" He looked at her for a long moment, his whiskers twitching as his face wore a lopsided scowl. Refusing to back down, Naira ultimately won the staring contest. His gaze fell away, and he tucked his own stick back into his pocket without lighting it. Then he ran both hands through his short hair with an exasperated sigh. "Good," Naira said, snapping the necrol sticks in her hand and discarding them. "Now, I think it's time we parted ways. Rolf and Naomi, you take one of the bikes. Tigra, take Moira with you on the other, and she can get you where you need to go. I'll catch an evening bus and walk the rest of the way." Nearly everyone protested to these instructions, and almost all for different reasons. The only ones who didn't protest were Rolf and Naomi, who looked thrilled at the prospect of sharing a hoverbike. Moira doubted they would have any difficulty clinging to each other. It was simply a question of who sat where and which one would drive, but they were already hashing that out. The police chief took a step forward. "I wasn't joking in there. We really do need to take your statements. I trust my detective, but one witness statement for something like this isn't going to be enough." "And I am not letting my old friend anywhere near your police station," Naira said, stepping in between the 2 officers and Tigra. She looked like a child using their body to shield an adult, as the enormous tiger loomed behind her. Tigra shrugged. "I warned you this happened, Chief." Chief Leo rubbed at his eyes with his palms. His voice escaped him in a tangle of frustration. "For Ohana is dead, as is her family." That sapped much of the fight from the 2 Alchemancers. Even the 2 lovebirds stopped what they were doing to listen. The chief continued. "We haven't had a chance to check on Orana, but Dravota and Varahina are both missing. Naira, I went to your home, and it's been turned upside down. Someone tried to have Tigra killed tonight, and I think you being here was too... Someone tried to have Tigra killed tonight, and I think you being here too was a happy accident for them. You're all in danger. We're all in danger. Because you and your friends know something or did something that someone is trying very hard to keep hidden. So I can't keep any of you safe unless you help me." Naira looked at the other Nolfs, at her friend, and at Moira with a pained expression that thinly veiled her mixed emotions. Re-establishing eye contact with the chief, she asked in a coldly polite tone, "Why should the police help people like us?" This earned her a wry smile from Chief Leo. "Because if we don't do the right thing, who will?" Something about his question seemed to settle into Naira, and she stared at him for a long while. After an agonizing period where Moira wished Shimmer actually enabled one to read minds, Naira finally spoke. "I will trust you, and any you trust. Is it a large number, or a small one?" The chief glanced over his shoulder at Detective McKinley, who mirrored his sardonic smile with an uncertain wave of her hand. Honestly, small, he said. Very small. We're still figuring out who among our own we can trust. In that case, Naira said, I suggest that rather than seek asylum at your precinct, we instead seek out a more neutral ground. He sighed, but nodded. All things considered, that's probably a good idea. Did you have something in mind? I might, she replied, before turning to stare at Moira with a questioning glaze. I might, she replied, before turning to stare at Moira with a questioning gaze. Every one of the adults in the circle turned with her to look down at Moira. It was unnerving, and though every instinct made her want to shy away from so many tall eyes, sheer desire to stand tall enabled her to do so. These adults, bigger and older and supposedly wiser, all needed her help. The more she drank that in, the sweeter it tasted. So she indulged in her theatrical side, one she owed completely to her mother. Rolling her eyes in a wide arc, she fought to suppress her smile of satisfaction at this new feeling of power and even equality. My mother does like keeping the guest bedrooms ready and available, and while they're no doubt all booked up due to my mother's undying popularity, I suppose we can probably spare a few. Her sarcasm was lost on a group like this, as only Naira actually knew what her mother was like. There would be plenty of free beds back home. Choosing a more sincere tack, she could suppress the smile no longer. You know, it's been years since I last hosted a slumber party. Well, one down. And I need a super quick restroom break. I will be right back. Don't you worry. We'll keep it going. Say it for the last chapter. Okay, I'm back. Still got everyone? Drink of water so I can continue to burp during this next chapter. At least my throat won't be dry. All right. Chapter 33. Coming Home to Roost. Moira let out a whoop as Naira took a corner at speed, tilting the hoverbike so far to one side their knees almost scraped the road. Naira grinned, increasing the throttle to accelerate through the curve. The roads were dark by this time of night, but they had the good fortune of having little traffic to deal with. Seed mother, it felt good to let loose again. To have broken free from another cage and feel the wind ruffle Naira's fur as she redlined the incredible machine beneath her. As before, Moira sat in front of her, held in place with a lap belt designed to keep the driver on the bike while tilting. The snappered girl was small enough, Naira could sit almost comfortably behind her and still drive the bike as well as if she was alone. However, that was something the girl wouldn't appreciate hearing, so Naira didn't comment on it. It did make her a bit sad she'd never had a hover bike like this while raising her boys. It would have been fun to wow them by taking them for rides. Although that particular opportunity was lost to her now, this one was still quite worth it. She'd promised to show the girl speed, and after the experience they just had, even Naira welcomed the distraction. To make up for the time spent locked underground, she was going to show Moira what it meant to fly. Moira's small body pressed into hers, a lone source of heat in the face of the rushing wind. She was alive. They'd managed to keep the girl alive. Fanina. They'd all come out of it alive. Not for Ohana, she thought bitterly as she took another turn fast enough to almost drift onto the sidewalk. For Ohana and everyone important to her, shot in her own home. Either Bradburn or Paddock had gone back on their deal. No doubt the police would claim it was gang violence, but that was absurd. For Ohana was loved by those who knew her. She'd opened her home to almost a half-dozen rescues, including Naomi and Rolf. Along those lines, if they hadn't tried to break Rolf out of prison tonight, he'd be dead too. But 2 officers knew their story. More importantly, they believed it. All that remained was to regroup at the Dolahan estate, share what they knew, and plan an assault. The officers would probably call it an arrest, make it more palatable, but Naira wasn't letting Bradburn or Paddock walk away. Not with everything she'd been through. Not with the trail of bodies in their wake. And, she admitted, in her own. The heavy thoughts lifted away as she saw her goal. A decommissioned bridge parallel to the District 5 racing route. Back in her racing days, she'd always detoured for it. It usually cost her a few seconds during a race, but the unique sensation and thrill it provided was unmatched. Both riders had taken Shimmer before leaving the parking lot, and Naira still felt in her system about half of what she'd started with. Now she tapped Moira's knee. I need an Electrum crystal, and you need an Aurum crystal. Naira slowed her speed to make it easier, and Moira found them quickly. See the gap on the left ahead? Near the apex of the bridge. There is a missing guardrail there. Once we're through it, count to 10 and crack that Aurum. We're jumping off a bridge? Moira asked with audible incredulity. Grin hidden by the helmet, Naira opened the throttle, pressing the girl against her. What? Your mother never asked you if you would. She did, Moira yelled back as the wind picked up around them. But I never had friends to jump off with. Ones I wanted to push, sure, but not to jump with. Not to burst your bubble, but we're not actually jumping. What? Yeah, we're flying. Why is the page all weird? Yeah, we're flying. Zooming up the curve of the bridge, Naira pivoted, swinging the hoverbike wide as she pointed their nose at the gap. They rocketed towards it, and she let go of the handlebars with one hand to smash the Electrum crystal against the side of the bike. Latching onto the reaction, she directed the extra energy through the bike and down into the repulsors. They flared, launching the hoverbike several feet higher as they sailed off the side of the bridge. The view was as spectacular as Naira remembered. The bridge itself was originally installed to cross over one of the main waterways connecting this district to the ponds. As such, the waterway beneath them was lined with small residences on either side. All the short roofs beneath the pair of hoverbike riders enabled them to see for quite a few blocks. The moon, peeking through the glass of the bulb, was reflected in the water below. Gravity continued to work on them until they started to fall, arcing them back towards the ground as they maintained their forward momentum. There was a section of road up ahead, the primary bridge, much lower and much more... There was a section of road up ahead, the primary bridge, much lower and more easily accessible than the one behind them. Only judicious use of Aurum could help a driver cross the gaps.
Only judicious use of Aurum could help a driver cross the gap successfully. That was a lesson painfully learned when she was about Moira's age, and she'd never managed to fish that particular bike back out of the canal. The 10 count had passed. Moira, the Aurum. The girl beneath her stirred. Sorry. She cracked the crystal right away, and Naira latched onto the wind energy, giving them the final boost needed to land on the road instead of in the water. The hoverbike tilted as Naira swung to the side to redirect their momentum, taking off again at a right angle to the way they'd landed. You all good? She asked. Her passenger nodded, calling back, That was a rush! The water was pretty, you could see traffic in the distance, and you could feel the hoverbike riding the winds. I don't know what you did with the Aurum, but it sounded beautiful. Can we do it again? Naira hesitated. They had given the address to the others before splitting off to have this joyride. Besides, the way Naira drove, she'd probably still beat the others back to the Dolahan estate anyway. Do we have the crystals for it? Moira rifled through the bag. Yeah! Then you better get them ready, Naira said as she leaned into the turn and headed back up the road. Naira was wrong. Everyone beat her to the Dolahan estate. 2 cars and a hoverbike waited at the sentry station by the gate. Sorry, Moira muttered as they approached. Why? Naira asked. Did you enjoy that? Yeah. Then don't apologize. A little waiting won't hurt them. Besides, I was having just as much fun, so I share just as much of the blame. Come on, let's let them in. She pulled the bike up to the sentry station and was unsurprised to see a different guard than when they'd left. They'd been gone for over 15 hours, so the guard had probably been changed out twice. He walked up to the glass, leaning down to speak through the gap at the bottom. We'll lock down for the night. No one in or out. Come back in the morning. I think you'll find that we have good reason to be here. Right, Miss Moira Dolahan? The guard blanched at the mention of her name, his new odor betraying his nervousness. Naira looked down to see Moira scrutinizing the guard. Sorry. She gave the girl a friendly nudge. Going to give the man your ID so we can go in? Yeah, Moira said, as if the thought hadn't occurred to her. She produced her gate pass and handed it over, adding, It's the newest kind. You have to swipe it over there before we can use the sensor out here. The guard took it, looked at it for a few seconds, then nodded and followed her instructions. The moment his back was turned, Moira leaned back, accidentally bumping helmets with Naira. I made that up because I don't know that guy, she hissed in a low whisper. I sneak out a lot, so I know a lot of the guards. I have never seen that guy before. Great. The guard came back and held out the pass, which Moira took, but didn't use on the sensor yet. Why the lockdown? She asked. We aren't scheduled for another drill for at least a month. Everything okay at the house? The guard's hands disappeared into his pockets. Someone called in a bomb threat, so they're sweeping the grounds just to be sure. Honestly, it's safer for you to stay out here. Well, genius, Moira said, pointing at the 2 police cruisers parked a short distance away. If there's an active bomb threat, why'd you stop the police that got sent to help with it? Nobody called the police, the guard said, a little too fast. Security's got everything under control. Clearly, Moira said, with a dryness that was lost on the man in the box. He still smelled quite nervous. Well, I'm safest with my bodyguard, so I'm going to stay by her side as we go inside, okay? The guard protested, but Naira gripped the edge of his window. You do not need to worry. I'm going to keep her safe from all threats. That shut him up, and Moira held her gate pass up to the sensor before he could change his mind. She waved the other vehicles through the now lifted gate, and then Naira followed after. She pulled up beside one of the cars and rapped her knuckles against the window. It lowered, and Detective... No, they'd called him Chief now. When had that promotion happened? Chief, Leo, regarded her with a raised eyebrow. They normally lock the place down? He asked. Naira shook her head. Not in my experience. He told us someone phoned in about a bomb threat. His eyes widened. A bomb? I thought you said this was going to be a neutral space. It's supposed to be, she insisted. But just stay alert. The night's not over yet. He sighed and nodded. Let everyone else know, and then I guess we'll just follow you. She did, and a few minutes later they pulled up to the house as a group. The yard was a mess of people scanning the grounds with electrum flashlights. There had to be several hundred security guards overturning every tiny rock and blade of grass. Someone jogged over as they approached. A younger Sneppard in a well-pressed Dolahan security uniform. They carried the scent of liberally applied deodorant and a little too much hair gel. The face, however, was unmistakable, so Naira didn't even need to see his name badge to know this was Bryce. The helmets came off as Naira powered down the hoverbike and helped Moira dismount. The pads of his feet backpedaled as he saw and clearly recognized Naira. His eyes darted from her to Moira and back. His nervousness was so pungent, even Moira could probably have picked it up, if she knew what she was smelling for. I'm here to help, Naira assured in a measured tone. They left their helmets on the hoverbike, and Naira took her bag back from Moira. Moira looked him up and down, seeming generally unimpressed with his demeanor. Cat got your tongue or something? Or are you going to tell us what's going on? He snapped to attention, clicking his ankles together and saluting Moira. She groaned low enough that only Naira caught it. Sorry, ma'am, he said. Someone phoned in a bomb threat and demanded money, so they've got us combing the grounds. Moira narrowed her eyes at him. You a new hire? I haven't seen you around before. His salute had dropped, but his stiff, upright posture remained. Factory security, ma'am. Got transferred today. We've crossed paths a few times before, Naira said, putting a hand on Moira's shoulder. He's not someone you have to worry about. No, ma'am, he agreed. His fear was abating, slowly. There weren't shortcuts for something like that. The others were exiting their vehicles now, and seeing that two of them were uniformed officers seemed to help Bryce's peace of mind. More help? He asked. Naira hesitated only a moment, which was enough for Moira to interject. They're with me. They'll be staying with us. They'll be staying with us. Including the, He rubbed at his eyes as if they were deceiving him. The tiger? Moira asked. Yeah, he's a friend. Right. Of course, of course. Naira glanced around at the other guards wandering the property. None were close enough to really see their faces. A few looked their way, but seemed satisfied since Bryce was visibly following up on the newcomers. Still, she didn't see the one she was looking for. Where's your boss? Inside, Miss Salatra. He ordered a lockdown, so he and some others are guarding Madame Dolahan while we search for the bomb. Madame said it was probably a prank or attempt to get some easy money out of her, but with everything that's happened to her recently... He trailed off, his eyes darting to Naira. When she returned a raised eyebrow, he averted his gaze and cleared his throat. Head Marston wants to take every precaution we can. Seems wise, Naira noted. She leaned in to whisper, and the boy flinched back. With a soft sigh, she said in a quiet voice, Relax, I'm not going to bite you. Moira here saw someone at the sentry station she didn't recognize. Did Marston transfer more factory guards over? To his credit, Bryce did make a visible attempt to act less worried. He considered. I don't know. There wasn't a call for it or anything. I made the transfer because I thought working the house would be better for my long-term health. So others might have felt the same way? But I haven't heard of any big transfers or anything. Naira nodded, allowing a small grimace. In that case, I would recommend that you go find your supervisor, since they should know who's supposed to be at the gate. Tell them what we've told you, and that Moira Dolahan wants to make sure nothing's amiss. You think the threat is real, then? He said, voice rising in panic. Naira motioned with her hands to keep his voice low, though she doubted any of the other guards were really close enough to notice or care. I'm simply saying we should act like it is until we're proven wrong. He hung his head. It doesn't matter where I go. Trouble just follows me. While Naira could relate to the sentiment, a pity party wasn't going to help anyone right now. So she urged him to get going, and after some stammering and rapid nods, he left. Moira was watching the house nervously, but had the good sense to wait with the adults. She didn't have to wait long, because the moment Naira took a step towards the house, a gunshot rang out from inside. Everyone broke into a run. Moira swiped her ID over the sensor at the door, and the group filed inside with Naira in the lead. They listened for another gunshot, but none came. There were a few muffled pops, but they didn't sound like gunshots. An intimately familiar scent hung in the air, one that shouldn't be here, and Naira couldn't stop herself from following it. It led them up the stairs. Rolf and Naomi had caught it too, and they were right behind her as she ran down the corridor. The scent came from a closed door, Renetta's office. Pulling up beside the door, Naira distributed shimmer to anyone who wanted it before taking a couple doses herself. Most of them still had a few crystals left after the prison, but she held the bag open for anyone who needed to restock. Moira immediately grabbed for an electrum crystal, and Naira almost swatted her hand. She didn't, though, instead giving her a disapproving look, which Moira pointedly ignored. If the girl's mother was truly in danger, Naira wasn't going to deny her any tools that might help. Squaring up at the door, the police drew their own guns, and Leo gave her a grim nod. Naira gripped the handle and flung the door open. As it opened, Naira caught 4 distinct scents: sulfur, necrum, an old friend, and half a lifetime of memories. Memories of a warm, fuzzy bundle whose eyes didn't open for almost a week. Memories of pet frogs and favorite rocks. Memories of bus rides to the park in District 11 Memories of bus rides to the park in District 10 because District 11 didn't have its own baseball diamond. Memories of a striped shirt that she spent hours embroidering, only to have the stitching tear free when it shrunk after 5 trips through Gertrude the washer. Memories of keeping a ruler and a marker easily accessible, because the growth spurts were measured in inches per week rather than per month. Memories of eyes that lit up on seeing Fyram in action, and a mouth that questioned why she ever let anyone boss her around. Memories of visiting the nurse's office after a schoolyard fight where a broken jaw was exchanged for a notched ear. Memories of 2 inseparable partners whose interests slowly diverged as one took after mother and the other took after father. Memories of an empty bedroom the night 2 left the house and only 1 came home. Memories of repairing the holes in the attic walls only after the source of the holes had called her a Mueller and walked out for good. All she had anymore were memories and his scent. Naira stepped into the room. It was a mess. An Aurum burst had flung books, papers, folders, pens, and all manner of desk accessories in all directions. 5 guards lay around the room. 6 once she spotted Marston. Bits of shattered crystals littered the ground near them. At a glance, it was impossible for Naira to tell how many of the guards were still breathing. Renetta was seated in a chair that dwarfed her. A small, blood-soaked burlap bag hung from the hilt of a knife that was buried in her chest. Behind her chair, a large window framed 2 figures, both Nulfs. One was her old friend, Drvota. The other was Naira's own son, Tazael. Both had eyes vibrant with a prismatic glow. Both were surprised to see her. "What is the meaning of this?" Naira demanded. "Mom?" Tazael asked. The sound of his voice, a voice she hadn't heard in almost a year, nearly brought her to tears. "They said you wouldn't be here tonight." In his hands, he cradled a pair of crystals nearly as thick as his arm. They were taped together, one a deep orange and the other a pale tan. So the bomb threat was no mere threat. "Salatra," Drvota said, In my last act as your friend, I suggest you run. I'm sick of running. I want some answers. Dravota sighed, his eyes drifting towards the snippered woman slumped in her chair. Fanina, Renetta was still breathing. I was sent to bring a warning and to finish what you started. Cautiously, Moira, Leo, and Melissa entered behind her. Moira screamed when she saw her mother, and Naira had to plant a hand on her shoulder to stop her from running any closer. The girl hadn't seen the crystal Dravota was idly running a thumb along. Tazel, please, Naira entreated. Come home. His face was cold, and he tried to keep it impassive, but his mother knew him too well and could see the doubt in his expression. He forced himself to look away, shaking his head. I can't. Not yet. Whatever is going on, we can help each other through it. We're all family, she said, looking between both friend and son. Dravota's lip curled into a snarl. No, Salatra, I'm no family of yours. Not after what you've cost me. Please, Naira entreated again. Grabbing the large crystal pairing from Tazel's arms, Dravota slammed them both against the desk with a horrifying crack. Then he simply laid the crystals on the desk. Turning to the large window behind them, he cracked the crystal in his hand, shattering the glass with a concentrated aurum burst. He leapt through and disappeared into the darkness beyond. Tazel watched him go, then turned to look back at his mother. There was pain in his expression, but it was overwritten by a cold stubbornness. I'm sorry, was all he said, before he leapt out after Dravota. Moira cried out and ran to her mother, heedless to the enormous crystals glowing on the desk. Naira latched onto the energy-seeking release. It was far more than she'd ever tried to contain, and it wouldn't listen to her. It was far more than she'd ever tried to contain, and it wouldn't listen to her for long. She had a few seconds at best. Tigra, get it outside! Naira yelled. We have to redirect it! The tiger charged into the room, both Nolfs following after. Both officers watched wide-eyed as Tigra scooped up the crystals and threw them like a javelin out the window. She and the other Nolfs ran up beside him, and she felt the combined efforts to redirect the absurd amounts of Fyrum and Aurum energy anywhere but at the house. Then it exploded in an enormous fireball. The shockwave flung them all backwards, and Naira collided first with the ceiling, then the wall, and finally the floor. Her shoulder, already sore from being teethed earlier tonight, hung at an awkward angle, and even the slightest movement sent ripples of pain that made her gasp. Sulfur and smoke hung in the acrid air. As she glanced up, she saw that nearly the entire outer wall had been blown inwards. Chunks of debris decorated the wall like a child left alone in a room with a dish of thumbtacks. A tree outside the office had caught fire to its upper branches, but the house had been spared from any flame. Coughing against the unpleasant fumes wafting through the gaping hole, she pushed herself to her knees before staggering to her feet. Others in the room were similarly picking themselves up. Chief Leo was pulling a chunk of drywall off of Detective McKinley. Naomi was looking over Rolf, who had blood running through the fur above his eyes. Tigra used the wall to hobble to his feet, and a shaft of wood nearly the size of a broomstick protruded from the side of his calf. Moira looked shaken, but otherwise unharmed, as she hastily half-crawled, half-ran to where her mother's body had been tossed to the side. Dravota and Tazel were getting away, and Naira was the only one in good enough condition to go after them. They'd only started running seconds before. She had Aurum to cushion a fall from this height. She could get to the hoverbike, track her son's scent, and then... Naira, help! Moira screamed. Standing poised in the gap in the wall, Naira looked back at them both. Moira's hands gripped her mother's shoulders, claws tearing fresh holes in a suit jacket that cost more than Naira made in a year. The bloody bag hung at a new awkward angle where it had been pinned by the knife in Renetta's chest. It was embedded in the right side of her body, which explained how she was still breathing. But she wouldn't last. But she wouldn't be for long. And the longer Naira hesitated, the faster her son's trail would go stale. Give her the Curum we've got and call an ambulance. You've got a natural talent for healing that I don't. Naira didn't tell her that she doubted an ambulance could get here in time. There's only one good crystal in the bag, Moira said through tears. We used the rest already. Naira checked inside her bag and saw that the girl was right. Unless Moira could work a miracle with it, Renetta would be dead in a few minutes. Madame Dolahan was a lost cause. Logically, the only sensible thing to do was ease her pain while Naira chased down her killers. But saying that aloud would destroy any relationship she had with Moira. The girl was too emotionally distraught to understand the bigger picture. This was an opportunity. By following her son, Naira could trace this back to whoever had blackmailed her in the first place. I'm here because you failed, Dravoda had said. I'm here to finish what you started. That had to mean Dravota, and likely Tazale, were working for whoever still had Elaine. So by following Tazale, she could get her family back. In the corner, Leo was checking Melissa's pulse. Naomi was ripping her own shirt to wrap Rolf's forehead. Tigra gingerly touched the shard sticking out of his leg, finger recoiling as he let out an involuntary growl. And Moira, young, honest, trusting Moira, crouched over her mother's body, her eyes red and pleading. If I don't go, we lose them, Naira said softly. Moira glared at her through her tears. If you go, I lose you both. Fanina. It shouldn't even be a choice. Renetta had defied death once already. Logic said it couldn't happen a second time. Logic said that her son was getting away, and if Naira didn't go now, she'd lose him again. She stood there, one foot gripping the edge. Her family needed her. Salatra was ready to give chase, her muscles tensed, ready for launch. One thing kept her from leaping. Moira's steady gaze. Her eyes held an accusation, a challenge, and a plea. It wasn't logic spurring Salatra on to abandon all and chase her son. It was fear. Fear that she'd finally seen him alive for the last time. Since when did Salatra let fear control her? Naira could be afraid, but that was a luxury Salatra couldn't afford. She was right about one thing. The world didn't need Naira, the desperate mother, right now. It needed Salatra, the Alchemancer. Stepping back from the hole in the wall, she made her choice. Hurrying to Moira's side, she produced the last of the major Curum crystals and held it out. When I pull out the knife, she's going to bleed, badly. So you're going to stop it. Moira's eyes widened, and she shook her head. Naira, I don't know. Everything I've healed up to this point, some of it's been bad, but not like this. If I screw up, she dies, and I can't lose her again. Please, you have to do it. With a soft smile, Naira shook her head. I could heal the outside, but I'm not good at visualizing someone else's insides. She'd bleed out internally if I tried. Moira, the way you heal is comprehensive, thorough. That's what she needs right now. And it's what you're going to do. Because you can do it. Gently, she pressed the crystal into Moira's hand, enclosing the girl's fingers with her own. Moira stared down at it, and Naira watched the panic in the girl's face make way for resolve. The pride Naira felt at that moment helped beat back the growing fear that she'd made the wrong choice. Ready? She asked, her hand poised over the hilt of the knife. After a few shaky breaths, Moira nodded. Do it. In one smooth motion, Naira pulled the knife free. Moira worked fast, and though the song started a little tremulously, the longer she worked, the more confidently she sang. Naira watched in amazement at how quickly the skin laced back together. If this girl had access to enough high-grade Curum, maybe she could work a miracle. But they only had the one crystal, and it'd be spent in a few minutes. Naira knew where to get more. Looking around the room, they were definitely going to need more. They'd all have to pile into a car and take a trip to District 9 to visit someone who hated unexpected visitors and strangers. Realistically, there was nowhere else in town to get high-grade materials, unless Naira tried to rob a hospital. Considering how recently that had been done by other people present in the room, that wasn't likely to work out in Naira's favor. Beyond that, maybe this would finally clear her debt. A life for a life. I was sent to bring a warning, Ravoda had said. In removing the knife, the bag had come free, settling on the ground beside Renetta, a suspicious lump concealed within. The brown fibers were stained red, but based on how much had collected at the bottom of the bag, it wasn't just Renetta's blood. The bag itself was big enough to hold a small stack of dinner plates, but the lump inside looked small enough to hold with one hand. Naira picked it up. As soon as she had it close, she caught a new scent, and her breath caught painfully in her chest. Setting it on the floor, her fingers fumbled with the cord on the bag. Her arms were shaking all the way up to her elbows. Opening the bag, there was a note on top, written on a folded and partially crumpled sheet of paper. As with the bag, an entire corner of the note was soaked in blood. And all of it smelled of Elaine. The note was written in large, attention-grabbing letters. Salatra. A little birdie told me that you didn't do your job. Now that the cat's out of the bag, I thought I'd give you a hand. I hope it helps. Expect one final set of instructions. I suggest you follow them. Unless you'd like another hand. The bag quivered as Naira reached in and plucked out the note. Something soft tickled her finger. Something covered in fur. She recoiled and her lungs hitched. Pulling the note away provided a fresh whiff of Elaine. Tears formed freely as the gravity of it all sank in. She'd made the wrong choice. Not here. No. Back at the ponds, when she'd made her choice to spare Renetta Dolahan. As if she could actually hide what she'd done. In sparing a stranger, she'd condemned the man she loved enough to kill for. And here was the proof. Her eye was drawn to a small, golden band nestled in brown and silver fur. It was identical to the ring that currently graced her own left hand. Lifeless fingers curled in on themselves, like legs of a spider that had died from the loss of its abdomen. She knew those fingers as well as she knew her own. Knew where the pads had roughened from years of playing stringed instruments. Knew what they felt like when gripped in her own. Fingers that would never hold hers again. Inside the bag was Elaine's left hand. It had been removed at the wrist. Everyone else in the room forgotten, Naira channeled all of her grief into a long, anguished wail. There were no police sirens to hide it this time. End of part 4. Intermission. Epilogue. Oh, we need that, and we need that. Epilogue. Jazale shouldn't have turned around to look, but he couldn't stop himself. His mother stood at the broken window, pointing frantically and barking an order he couldn't quite make out. A few moments later, an enormous tiger stepped up to the window and flung the alchemantic bomb up into the night sky. It glowed with an orange intensity that lit the side of the opulent mansion like it was already on fire. 2 more Nulfs stepped up to the window. Dear friends that probably hated him for what he'd done. They didn't understand. Everything he did for them. For his family. For this whole bracking bulb. All 4 persons at the window had visible prismatic glow. As one, their faces settled into such expressions of concentration Jazale found himself cheering them on. Maybe there was still time before... The bomb exploded with a shockwave that hurt his ears, and a fireball so bright he could still see the outline as his eyes slammed shut reflexively. Shaking his head, he blinked furiously, trying to clear the enormous afterimage taking up most of his vision. Looking back at the mansion, his heart stopped. The entire wall was gone. He saw no survivors, only rubble. No. Mom! He yelled. Quiet, you idiot, Dravoda snapped, grabbing Tazale by the shoulder and clapping a hand around his muzzle. Every guard on this entire property is going to be running this way in a moment. Do you really want them to find us? No. Tazale didn't want that. His brain was starting to work again, and he knew calling attention to himself was stupid and selfish. Still, that didn't mean he was going to let anyone manhandle him. With a growl, he tore Dravoda's hand away. Get off me! Dravoda's face settled into a snarl of its own. I tried to warn her. If she didn't listen, that's on her. We had a job to do, and we did it. This is all part of the bigger picture. And if you don't want to lose your father, too, then I suggest you don't lose sight of that. Tazale's fingers curled into a fist on their own, and he socked Dravoda in the nose. This bracking, arrogant pile of dross had just set off a bomb in his mother's face. Best case, she was buried under rubble and seriously injured. Worst case, she was dead, and Tazale had just lost a second family member. And still, this man thought the best course of action was to threaten the last relative Tazale had left? You don't get to make that call, Tazale growled through clenched teeth. Blood leaked around Dravoda's fingers as he clamped a hand over his nose, adding a more nasal tone to his words. I'm not making that call, Tazale. Or have you forgotten who's pulling both our strings? Oh. Tazale hadn't forgotten. One name sat at the very top of the list for Tazale. One person who deserved to be burned in the fiery pits of Fanina forever. To be flayed alive and devoured piece by piece by swarms of anima spawn. Walter Brecking Bradburn. Every moment Tazale spent in Cyphus was another moment closer to the next time a Sneppard took the life of someone Tazale held dear. He was done playing nice. If Sneppards were allowed to rack up a body count, then so was he. Shaking his head in frustration, Dravoda took off in a jog across the property, heading for the spot where they'd cut a hole in the fence. Tazale jogged after him, fuming. Before stepping through to the street, he took one last look over his shoulder. What he saw made him forget to breathe. His mother stood atop the rubble, one hand leaning on what remained of the wall. Relief flooded him. He should have known better. His mother was like him, a fighter to the bitter end. He wasn't going to let her down. She'd asked him to come home. Truth was, he wanted nothing more. But he couldn't go home yet. Not when his dad was still being held hostage by a monster. Tazale would secure his father's freedom, no matter how tall the mountain of Sneppard corpses it took to get there. Don't worry, Mom. I'm going to end this. With that, he left the Dolahan Manor behind. I'm going to make them all see. And then there's going to be Fanina to pay. Yes, Walter Bradburn was going to burn. The end of Volume 1. We did it! Woo! My arms and nose are tingling. I wasn't breathing enough oxygen during all of that. Woo! Ah! Congratulations, guys. We have reached the end of Book 1. Sins of Your Fathers. How do you guys feel? I know. I was legitimately tearing up while I was reading part of that. Oh, oh, I love these characters so much. Oh, it means a lot that you guys have come out week after week to listen to these my little story. So, sorry to leave you on a cliffhanger for the week, but next week we'll pick up with Volume 2. We'll get to continue. As man. That was a wild ending. Actions have consequences, and sometimes they're brutal, and it hurts my heart. Oh, poor Elaine, poor Naira, poor Moira, poor Renetta. Well, yeah, but like, even when I was writing it, it felt wild. uh, I mean, I did, but also the characters, they made choices, they made decisions. I just followed those decisions to their logical conclusion. Oh, I'm just so excited for book 2, though. I'm just so excited. Finally, we have all the gang together. Admittedly, they are all super beat up and in terrible condition, and some of them are on death's door. But, they have one healing crystal, so it'll all be good. Even the husband is there. Oh, that's so dark. That's so dark. Oh, family reunion. Yikes. Yikes. Oh. So yeah. What'd you guys think of Volume 1? Glad to have embarked on the ride. And I didn't mention it earlier, but yeah, Bryce. I love Bryce. He shows up all the time and he's great. Oh. Well, now that we're, through book 1, I can ask again. Favorite characters? Got a big cast, but at this point we've met just about everybody. I think there's still one major player to get introduced to, but that'll open book 2. Just all of them. But there's so many. Oh, I do love Naira. But also I love them all. When I was writing that, I did not know if Naira was gonna leave to go chasing after her son, or if she was gonna stand behind with Moira. And it was one of those things that, until I got to that point in that moment of Moira guilting her about leaving, that it was like it finally clicked, and I was like, "Oh, she's actually gonna stay. She's gonna stay. This is great." Oh, Renetta, Renetta. All right, kid. I'm gonna pull this knife out of your mother's chest, and it's up to you whether she lives or dies. So no pressure. Good luck. The adult can't do it. You've got to do it. Ooh. Man, yeah, no, I've got the nervous tangles all over. I was so into that chapter, especially knowing what was coming. Whew. Mother-daughter bonding. Well, they'd taken all of their crystal supply with them to the prison, and then used most of it at the prison. So by the time they got back here, they were down to just a few crystals. And one Kurum crystal in particular. That's what they got. Somewhere is going to have to make it count. They can make more Kurum in the near future, but it takes time to set and cure. And yeah, Marston was in the room. Tazale and Moira Slovern. I mean, they both kind of absolutely hate each other. Like, a lot. They both have zero respect for each other. So, you know. But I guess we'll see. And yeah, Marston, the security guard, was down and needs Kiram to. Probably. Perfect for enemies to lovers. I guess we'll find out. But seriously, guys, thank you so much for hanging out week after week and listening to my little book. 555 pages in 3 months. It's wild. I can't believe it's been 3 months that I've been doing this, but that's been fun. It's been good. And book 1 down. Book 2 starting next Tuesday. We move on from Sins of Your Fathers to Prism in Our Veins. Which, give me a sec. Let me see if I can pull up. Ooh. I should have. Maybe. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Just throw that up in the background. Ugh. Cover all the things with it, including me. Oh. Look at this beautiful book cover. And every time I look at Pasa's art, it just fills me with so much joy. Pasa's so good. But yeah, we'll be moving on to book 2 next week. Prism in Our Veins. Okay. Well, thanks for all stopping in. We're ending a little early this week, which I guess maybe makes up for how late last week went. But anyway, thank you all for coming. And I will see you guys next Tuesday when we actually jump into Prism in Our Veins. So have a good night, everybody. Love you guys.